confession of exactly what went through. You know, in politics, as at the time an event is happening, very much of it is always kept under wraps. But as soon as there's a fallout or something, everything comes to fore. And I think for this case, for the former deputy president, I think he's the one who's triggered this conversation because he did an interview 1 week ago in Kalenjin radio stations, vernacular stations, and he even played audio with about conversations, for example, with MP Oscar Sudi and the rest. And I've seen even Oscar Sudi trying to respond and saying who are the people per se who are behind him. He said, I was among your chief supporters, but majority of the MPs, especially from the Mount Kenya region, were for Kithure Kindiki. So that was the position then. And when it comes to the position of the deputy president, I think maybe at that time, the presidency of William Ruto had not been clear how he would operate. Because remember, President William Ruto, when he was a deputy president, was always a darling of the MPs. He had a way with the members of parliament. And I believe that was the only basis why he could not be impeached in the last second term for the second president, because despite it being a grand coalition, or more or less like the handshake government, which had almost the majority of the MPs, if indeed the former president Uhuru Kenyatta had support of the majority of the Jubilee MPs, I sincerely think that the president would have been up for for the same impeachment he's taken through the former deputy president. But as it is then, the deputy president has succeeded to galvanize most of the MPs then elected under the Jubilee ticket. So that gave him a buffer. And I even think that provided the basis for negotiations and discussion around a potential number 2. And that's why if you look at this conversation, it was mostly the MPs. It was almost exclusively the MPs. Outside the support of the party, it was exclusively an MP issue. And again, the people who were subject to selection were senator and MP. So it was more or less like an in-house thing. And in this case, it was easy for William Ruto to call around the entire team of MPs and bias being on Mount Kenya, because the candidate would come from Mount Kenya. So how do we get it? So it has been clearly explained and shared that even the president said I was the one among the minority that picked the deputy president. One of the things that I can see is a case of clash of personalities. I find the former deputy president and the president sharing the same personalities. These are headstrong, frontal kind political actors. I even think they really did well to stick together for even 2 years. Because if you look at the style, of our former deputy president, he's a rabble-rouser, he's a straight shooter, and he's one kind of a person for such a position of a deputy president to be really difficult to contain or maintain him. For William Ruto, he was a bit tactful in the first term of Uhuru. He was kind of mellow, he played along, because if you remember in 2015, he actually lost a significant core of his cabinet secretaries, Davis Chirchir, Felix Koskei. They were all removed, even his own chief of staff. If I would have swapped it with Rigathi Gachagua, then he would have lit a fuse for Uhuru Kenyatta. But for him, I think William Ruto was strategic or tactful in deciding, in the first term, you can never fight the king, or you cannot outshine your master in the first term. But as soon as, did you see the difference? As soon as the 2017 elections were over, and that was the rupture of the relationship between the deputy president, then William Ruto, and Uhuru Kenyatta. Because as soon as the election ended, of course, there was a repeat after the nullification, then immediately he hit the ground. And it only took 2 months for the president to say, who you are Tanga. So you could see the rupture was there. And he played the long game. For Rigathi, by virtue, as I've said, is a frontal kind of abrasive politician. It took too short. If, you can't also advise a politician per se. They always know best. And then politics is very circumstantial.